Someone I know threw a birthday party last year. Not a huge event, dinner, maybe 12 people, a restaurant they'd booked weeks in advance. And one of the guests, a guy who had more than 8,000 followers, posted about it beforehand. Story, countdown, the whole thing. And by the time the night actually happened, he'd spent most of it with his phone out. Angling shots of the food, checking who'd viewed the story so far. At the end of the night, the birthday person said, quietly, not to him directly, "I don't think he was really there." 8,000 followers got a version of that dinner, but the 12 people at the table got considerably less of that guest than they were meant to. And the one guest who didn't get their phone out at all didn't post a thing, talked to everyone, and remembered details about people's lives from conversations months earlier. He left without documenting a single moment. The birthday person texted him the next morning just to say it meant a lot that he came. That contrast, 8,000 strangers getting an altered perception, while 12 people at the table get a fraction of a person, is the thing I want to pull apart today. The psychology of why some people never feel the pull to document their life, or why others walked away from it entirely, is considerably more interesting and validating than you'd expect. I'll start with the uncomfortable part first then. Some people didn't quit social media because they were psychologically healthy and self-aware. Something usually drove them away from it. A relationship ended or a period of depression made the gap between their real life and everyone else's highlight reel unbearable. Someone posted something genuine and got either ignored or misunderstood, and the exposure of that, the vulnerability that went unrewarded, left a residue that didn't fade. For a lot of people, leaving wasn't a calm, considered decision. It was closer to self-preservation. And that's worth naming, because the narrative that private people are just more evolved is a little too clean. Sometimes they're just people who got hurt by the machine and decided not to go back. That's a completely valid reason and someone's truth. What's interesting is what happens after, because almost universally, and you'll recognize this if it's you, the people who left describe a specific sensation a few weeks in. Something quiets down. Not fear of missing out, closer to the opposite actually. Like a background noise you'd stopped noticing was suddenly gone, and you realize you hadn't heard silence in years. And when you ask them what they miss about it, most of them have to think for a long time. And then they usually say something like, "I don't really miss it at all." There's research that helps explain why that quiet happens. A study published in the Journal of Consumer Research found that when people anticipated sharing an experience, even before they actually did, they enjoyed the experience measurably less. It's the mental act of preparing to document something that pulls you partially out of it. You're living the moment and simultaneously packaging it for an audience, and those two things compete. The memory you form becomes shallower, and you form less of an emotional attachment to it. Private people, whether they're aware of this study or not, felt that cost, and at some point they stopped paying it. These people were often told they were weird or different, asked what they were hiding. There's this reflexive suspicion that gets aimed at anyone who won't participate in the performance economy, like opting out of visibility is inherently a confession of something. And for a lot of people who grew up being told that, discovering that there's actual psychological reasoning behind how they've always felt, that lands differently than just being told, "You're right." The psychological term that's most relevant here is private self-consciousness, the tendency to focus inward, to examine your own thoughts and feelings rather than monitoring how you're being perceived. People high in private self-consciousness aren't detached from the world. They're actually more attuned to it, just on the inside. They notice what they actually feel about something rather than what they're supposed to feel. They ask, "What do I think about this?" rather than "How does this look to others?" And in a culture that has optimized almost everything for outward performance, that orientation can feel like a defect. It most certainly isn't. What it creates, and this takes time, doesn't happen automatically, is a sense of self that doesn't require external confirmation to stay stable. That's quite rare, since most people are running a constant background process of checking. Are people responding to me? Do I seem okay? Does my life look normal? Private people, however, sometimes by choice but other times out of necessity, dialed that process down. The social cost of that is real, and I want to acknowledge it honestly. Not posting in a world built around it creates a specific kind of friction. You become harder to track, and people who were staying connected through your feed have to actually reach out now, and a lot of them don't. Some friendships quietly dissolve through neglect because the low-effort connection point is gone. That can genuinely hurt for some. But what also tends to happen is the people who do show up, who text, call, and make actual plans, turn out to be a completely different category of person than the ones who were just following the feed. And the Harvard study of adult development, which tracked people for over 80 years, found consistently that the quality of your close relationships is one of the strongest predictors of long-term health and happiness we have. The depth of those connections, not the quantity. The guest who remembered details months later and got a text the next morning, that's the data. There's a generation, actually several of them, who remember what it was like before any of this existed, before silence became suspicious.
If you want more psychology videos that explain your personality in ways school never taught you, hit that subscribe button right now, because the next video might reveal something about yourself you've never realized.